SOLIDFPS here, and in this video I'll be going over my ultimate Glay build in the first Descendant. If you like shooting guns in this game, Glay is pretty much the go-to because she has an entire kit revolving around boosting gun damage and having infinite ammo. Glay is a boss killer, and I always switch to her whenever I'm about to queue into a Colossus fight or do any void reactor bosses. Also, if you only got regular Glay, you'll still be fine to follow along this video since my main build does not use any Ultimate Glay exclusive mods. The only other difference is that Ultimate Glay has much higher base defense at level 40. With that said, let's get into it. Glay's kit is pretty simple, but also somewhat interesting since abilities 2, 3, and 4 work differently depending on whether or not you toggled ability 1. Ability 1 is your Frenzy toggle. You spend health to Frenzy, which boosts your gun damage, reduces incoming healing, and increases incoming damage taken. If you need to do damage, keep this toggled on. If you get really low and need to heal, take it off before picking up any health cubes off the ground. Ability 2 is an AoE that does damage and lets you heal from enemies you've hit. Either it does more damage during Frenzy, or gives you a damage reduction buff if you're not frenzied. This ability is the least important, at least until we get into Transcendent mods later in this video. Ability 3 is Glay's most important buff because this is what gives her infinite ammo during Frenzy. When you're not frenzied, you can use this as a movement speed buff. Ability 4 is Glay's ultimate ability and is very powerful when paired with the right weapon and comboed correctly with the rest of her kit. Now we're going to build Glay from the ground up, starting with the most important mods first. Obviously not everyone watching this is going to have her fully catalyzed, so pay attention to the first set of mods if you want your Glay to be functional without full investment. Starting with the melee mod slot, you can put anything you prefer here if you just want the plus 10 capacity. I normally use long distance maneuvering in the melee mod slot now for the quality of life in climbing a Colossus or getting up higher on terrain in the arena. As for properly modding Glay from start to finish, the first thing you really need to do with her is prioritize getting 100% uptime on ability 3 for infinite ammo. You're going to do that with these 3 cooldown mods. And with these duration mods. The rest will come from your reactor, which we'll get to later. When you have enough cooldown and duration, your maximized lethality buff duration needs to be within about 0.5 seconds of your increased sensory cooldown time for 100% uptime. This is the most important part of getting Glay built right. Since we're getting the core of Glay's kit built right now, we'll cover the reactor and components real quick. When you're first getting her off the ground, you can use literally any reactor that has cooldown and duration on it. Eventually, you'll want to look for a THUNDERCAGE mounting reactor with bonuses to non-attribute and dimension so you can scale her 4th ability's damage. You can also keep an eye out for reactors with Colossus attack and cooldown and even use a Python instead of a THUNDERCAGE, but the reason I don't use that gun comes down to the numbers, which you'll see later in this video. In case you weren't aware, this game has a weekly rotation for farming reactors. In hard mode, go to your map and press the button on the bottom for difficulty level rewards. On this page, you'll search for general rounds, non-attribute, dimension. If it's available, you'll go to the zone it tells you to and start farming. When I recorded this, there wasn't a spot available. You can press the all rewards button at the bottom to see the schedule. Anyways, back to components, all that Glay really needs is HP and defense from her components. The Annihilation set that drops from Hard Mode Devourer was built for her since it has skill duration and gives you more attack as you lose HP. Just make sure to get another HP roll on the first component and another defense roll on the third component. Get anything else you want on all the other ones, it doesn't really matter that much. The problem with this set at the time of this video is the skill duration bugs out usually after a loadout swap or map change, so it doesn't always apply. It's still worth getting, but the bug keeps us from fully min-maxing our build in the short term since we can't afford to get Colossus attack on the reactor without this duration from this set. Back to our mods. Once you have infinite ammo working, fill in the gaps with these HP and defense mods so your effective health scales up a decent amount so you're not face down on the floor all the time. Since Glay uses her health to use her abilities and has such a firearm focused playstyle, Walk a Tightrope is one of her best in slot mods and she should be hovering just below 50% HP to take advantage of all her damage bonuses. Now with the massive Sanctification Transcendent mod equipped, Ability 2 becomes a valuable utility skill that lets us generate 3 Power of Life, which is Glay's unique resource, by spending our own HP. It's used as an on-demand Power of Life generator so we can have Massacre available as soon as we spawn into a Colossus fight. Massive Sanctification drops from Hard Dead Bride, or you can try to gamble for it by combining other spare Transcendent mods. With the Transcendent mod in place, now we just need to fill in the gaps with skill power mods so our Massacre damage goes up. Now with Glay fully built, let's get into the guns. Remember when I mentioned THUNDERCAGE when I showed you my reactor? Well yeah, surprisingly this gun is the best possible option for Massacre when you're not buffed by Enzo. Now the rolls I have on it are nice, but they're not quite perfect. If I could replace the firearm attack with weak point damage, then I'd be slightly better off and closer to max DPS. Anyways, moving on to the mods, there's something important you have to understand about modding guns for Glay. Massacre does not care about accuracy. Massacre does not care about mag size. Massacre does not care about reload speed. Massacre only cares about pure DPS. I run most of these mods in my other characters when using THUNDERCAGE. The only difference here compared to my usual build is that you need to run mental focus on your gun instead of real life fighter. Real life fighter does not work with Massacre for some reason, which is fine because Glay can start a Colossus fight and pre-stack mental focus to 150 stacks before the boss spawns in. If you were getting buffed by Enzo, then Python becomes the stronger choice, and that's why I mentioned keeping an eye out for a reactor with Python mounting as well. I'm still working on rolling this, but what I really want is Colossus attack, weak point damage, and crit rate. My Python is built exactly the same way as my THUNDERCAGE. And when we get to the numbers, you'll understand why it's modded like this and why I've been telling people that Python is only a support weapon compared to THUNDERCAGE unless it's being ran on a Valby with supply moisture or with an Enzo crit buff in play. For any other fights that make it past the usual Massacre burst, you should also consider chasing down the Afterglow and Piercing Light sniper rifles, and if you invest in them long term, you can give yourself options when you've played this game long enough. Afterglow is better for firing back-to-back shots because of its unique ability. Piercing Light is better for single big hits and for removing buffs from a Colossus with its unique ability. Situational, but nice to have. Along with hunting down those ultimate snipers, a fun Transcendent mod that only Ultimate Glay gets to use is Demonic Modification. You combine this with the raw damage of Piercing Light to turn your sniper rifle into a railgun. Now as long as your Piercing Light has all its damage mods maxed out and you get a crit, something like this happens. It's a nice gimmick, but doing this solo required me to do a loadout swap from Mass Sang to Demonic so I could get ability 4 off in the spawn, and then I had to fish for a lucky crit. Not practical. Loadout swapping is something that will be patched in the very near future, but the reason I'm still highlighting this Transcendent mod is because it could become practical in the future if we ever get any truly difficult team-based content, where we make sure to bring a Yushin to heal us. Needing to drain your health to charge the railgun is the only thing that holds this mod back, so if you know any Yushin mains that are into this game for the long haul, you probably want to add them to your friends list. Back to the main practical loadout. This is how you use Mass Sang with Massacre. Load into a Colossus fight. Go into Frenzy, use Mass Sang, use Massacre, use Sensory, and start stacking mental focus as you head into the arena. By the time the Colossus spawns, you should be ready to go. Pretty simple combo to rev up the machine before cooking the boss. Now let's look at some numbers. First off, here's how my THUNDERCAGE compares to my Python when I'm solo and there's no Enzo buff. All my stats are categorized in total from left to right, and the only real meaningful number here is the sustained DPS column on the right. Massacre does damage in 2 parts. The gun you have out, so in this case THUNDERCAGE, and the extra damage you get from Massacre itself. Then that is totaled together for one final sustained DPS estimate for peak output, while Glay sits at roughly 50% HP, with crits averaged out and weak points being focused 100% of the time. This includes how long we can shoot with infinite ammo, and Sensory's cast time plus ADS time becomes our reload speed to calculate sustained DPS. Those times are rough estimates from watching clips back frame by frame. Remember, as long as our sensory duration is within about 0.5 seconds of our sensory cooldown, we should have 100% uptime. This is because the cooldown starts to count down instantly, but the duration for the buff starts to count down roughly halfway into the casting animation. Anyways, without Enzo crit buff, my current THUNDERCAGE outperforms my current Python by about 13%. In practice, that difference only lets us shave off a second on solo Hard Mode Devourer. THUNDERCAGE 10 seconds, Python 11 seconds. Not a big deal, some of it has to do with execution, some with minor gear differences, but there is a difference. Now what happens if we compare the numbers with everything having perfect rolls? THUNDERCAGE would be about 6% better than Python when both guns are rolled perfectly. I also threw in Blue Blood Bloomer in this comparison because I'm sure some people were curious with it having 999 RPM, but that gun does not have great base stats, so it falls off. But wait, shouldn't a Python be built with Toxic Attack instead of crit? And yeah, if you didn't plan on playing Massacre and didn't plan on ever using it on Valby or with an Enzo in your group, then sure. Toxic Attack on the gun makes sense, it's thematically correct. In this example, I took away the crit chance mods, left the crit damage mods in so there's nothing significant to replace them with, and it shows slightly less DPS in the crit chance version even though Python's base crit is only 5%. Now this is in the context of infinite ammo on Glay, but if it was in the hands of other characters that can't really make this gun shine, so not Valby, Enzo, or Glay, it would come out to be much worse without an extended mag mod and maybe even a reload speed mod. Now the difference could be made up a tiny bit with whatever poison dots stack up, and with whatever the toxic resist debuff on the gun could do, but the real question is, do you want an average Python, or one that can really go to the moon? The real magic of Python unlocks when you have an Enzo on your team. For those of you that don't know, Enzo has a buff that can give to the whole team that adds 29% flat crit to your base. He's the best gun support class in the game, and that buff is why. That means that now that sad 5% base crit on the Python becomes 34%, and then gets multiplied by mods to become at least 66%. This is why I build my Python for crit, just like my THUNDERCAGE, because the gun goes from 6% worse to 7% better than an Enzo buff THUNDERCAGE, which represents the peak output you could squeeze out of the gun on Massacre Glay. Remember this clip, 3 Glays with Enzo buff and we're absolutely cooking. This is only with my THUNDERCAGE at the time. I don't even think this team was remotely min-maxed with everything I'm presenting here in this video. Imagine if every Glay was rocking a Python with both crit and weak point mods. One final thing you could do with this build is swap out the blue HP mod with shot focus and get a full 4-piece veteran component set. Unfortunately, this means you can't get skill attack on the reactor, but this build swap lets you do about 2% more DPS at the cost of losing over half of your effective health. About as glass cannon as it gets, but I thought, hey, someone out there is wondering why shot focus wasn't in my build. Anyways, here's a clip of Molten Fortress where we queued up as 4 people, asked 2 people to drop out, and then 2-man the entire fight with 1 Glay and 1 Enzo. But yeah, hopefully you get the idea. Glay and Enzo are meant for each other, and that pairing will get even better with a Python built for both crit and weak point. Anyways, that's pretty much it for the build video for my ultimate Glay. Like always, remember I don't main YouTube, so it takes me a while to produce a proper build guide like this. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video and found it useful, and if you did, like and subscribe for future content or swing by the Twitch stream when I'm live. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.
몰튼 포트리스 폭주 확인. 즉시 해제 장치를 전송하겠습니다.